So honestly, when I saw the trailer for Disney's Cruella, I got serious Birds of Prey vibes. I was afraid this was just going to be some unoriginal ripoff. I finally had the opportunity to sit down and watch this with my family. So how was it? Cruella tells a story of how young Estella takes on the fashion world and becomes Cruella de Vil. Emma Stone stars as the title character, and I just loved her performance. Stone creates a character that has a lot of quirky characteristics. I mean, sometimes she's endearing, sometimes sweet, other times devious and dark. And it's hard to pin her down to just one characteristic, but she's not haphazardly flopping between them. She creates a really sympathetic character who has a few different layers to her. And I like that she's flawed and that we see how she uses those flaws to her advantage, but we also get to see how they negatively impact her in other instances. Emma Thompson is also spectacular. She's dialed in the right amount of self-absorbed craziness playing the Countess. She's also right on the cusp of being over the top, but she doesn't go there. And I appreciated the reserve she uses to create an exaggerated character without becoming obnoxious. Joel Fry and Paul Walter Hauser played Jasper and Horace respectively, and they are such good additions to the cast. They have the real humanity to them, and they also bring a softness that I think is needed at times. But then they also contribute to the humor. With Hauser, the comedy leans more towards the physical, but with Fry, the humor comes in the form of sly looks and sarcasm. The origin story is really well developed, and it gives a good basis for the character of Cruella. Now, it has been forever and a day since I've watched 101 Dalmatians, but it felt like this movie might be retconning Cruella's arc just a little bit. The way I remember her from the animated movie is quite different from how the story leaves her here. And this story is also much darker than I thought it would be for a Disney property. And I know that a lot of the stories are actually very dark, but they're usually hidden with all these upbeat songs. And there's way more comedy in this than I expected. I mean, Paul Walter Hauser steals a bunch of the scenes that he's in because he is the perfect oddball. I mean, so many times his hijinks were cheesy, but he pulled them off just so well. Now, the soundtrack is superb. I mean, there are so many great songs that capture the era of the late 60s and early 70s. There's also a punk vibe to a lot of the attitude and the aesthetic of the film. We see the obvious examples in Cruella's fashion, but the origin story also has that punk rock feel as well. We watch a character who doesn't really ever follow society's norms or rules, and amidst challenging those norms, she finds a way to make her mark and find some happiness, even if those around her are just totally against it. The costume design is awesome too, and because this focuses on fashion, you would expect there to be some quality outfits, but there are so many on display. And it's not just with the fashion shows, but even Jasper and Horace get to take part in the fun costumes. And Cruella will unveil new looks, and at least once, she has a reveal that feels like it came straight out of the Hunger Games. I like that there are a few times that this pays homage to the animated movie. I mean, for example, one time, Cruella is driving a car frantically down the street with Jasper and Horace inside. She's got this crazy-eyed look as the car weaves throughout the narrow street. And it just reminded me so much of the animation. We also get some great scenes with four-legged friends, as well as some characters that are introduced that point us towards the animated 101 Dalmatians. And I liked those nods, and I loved how it ties in the overall franchise. Now, the movie is long, and I did feel the time. I mean, it's 2 hours and 14 minutes, and I began to lose interest for a little bit towards that latter half of the second act, but then it re-grabbed my attention, and I was invested all over again. And I think the runtime and the pace is going to be the biggest hurdle to get younger audiences engaged. There is some great slapstick humor that is infused, but I'd classify this as a drama first and then a comedy. And young kids may enjoy the hijinks that take place, and of course, I mean, just the dogs that are present, but I don't think that they occupy enough time that will keep the littles from just squirming in their seats. Now, I was really surprised at how much I ended up enjoying this. There is a slight air of mystery to the story, and I like that as well. I mean, some of it was pretty obvious, but there was one thing that I had assumed wrongly, and I like that surprise for me. The movie captures a really good vibe, and it creates a world that is both familiar and new. The origin story of how the villain for 101 Dalmatians came to be, I think, is executed really well, and it makes for an entertaining watch. And although I would have preferred a tighter narrative to trim down the runtime, I did enjoy the overall story and absolutely just loved the characters, the soundtrack, and the costume design. There's no sex, very brief baby butt nudity in the opening scene, maybe some slight profanity, and there is some violence. I give Cruella 4 out of 5 couches. So is there another Disney villain that you would like to see have an origin story movie made? Let me know who that is in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.